Shadow Island, the secret of a forgotten civilization. Introduction: a look into the darkness. The moon, large and bright, hung over the endless sea, like a mirror reflecting the stars. On a deserted coast stood two people, Leah and Mark. They were not just explorers, but seekers of truth, each with their own story and dreams. This was their first joint expedition into the unknown. Leah held an ancient map in her hand, silky paper with strange symbols and drawings that seemed to come to life under her gaze. She felt a strange warmth in her heart when her fingers touched the paper. "This is not just a map," she whispered, leaning slightly. "This is the key to something great." Mark, a tall and athletic man with a sharp mind, looked intently at the sky, where clouds were already beginning to gather in dark tangles. "Does it lead to an island?" he asked. "Are you sure?" Leah nodded. "Yes, I feel it. There's something long hidden here, something that will change our understanding of history." They quickly gathered their things: lanterns, ropes, an old compass, a few spare clothes. They knew the journey would be dangerous, but nothing would stop their quest for secrets. They got into the old boat, and Leah's heart began to beat faster. The water was dark and deep, the waves roaring and crashing against the side as if trying to stop them. "Ready?" she asked. Mark smiled. "Ready, go." Their boat moved into the darkness, the waves rising around them like living creatures trying to stop their journey. Chapter 1: First Steps into the Abyss. After hours of battling the storm, they finally reached shore. The wind died down, and the sky cleared, leaving a mass of clouds behind. An unusual landscape opened up before them, high cliffs rising from the water and a dense forest that seemed to beckon them to move on. Leah sighed slightly. "This is it, Shadow Island. This is where our adventure begins." Mark looked around, surveying the area. "There's something here. This is not just an island. This is a place that holds the secrets of thousands of years." They moved deeper into the forest. The trees were tall, with branches reaching into the sky like hands reaching for the stars. Underfoot, there was soft moss and fallen branches that hid unknown signs beneath them. "There's something here," Mark whispered, tightening his belt. They spent the first day exploring the ruins, half-destroyed steles and stone statues with strange symbols. Leah touched one of them and felt a strange cold and warmth at the same time. "This is something ancient," she said, "and at the same time alive." The next day, they came across the first temple, a huge structure from ancient times. The doors were closed, but they were engraved with strange symbols and drawings. "It's a mystery," Leah said. "To get inside, you need to solve it." Mark found a small stone with an engraving. "This is a key," he said. "You just need to understand what it means." They began to look for clues around them. Many hours of their search and research led them to solve the mystery. The mechanism was activated, and the doors slowly opened. The inner world of the temple was filled with a strange light and ancient runes. Shadows began to appear there, moving and whispering. They were the spirits of a long-vanished civilization. Chapter 2: The Underworld and Its Secrets. They entered a narrow corridor that disappeared into the darkness. The lights of the lanterns reflected off the walls, covered with strange hieroglyphs that glowed with a weak light. "It looks like a tomb," Mark said, looking closely at the image. A few meters later, they came across the main hall. There stood a statue of a deity holding a strange crystal that glowed with a bright light in its hand. "This is a source of power," said Leah, "but it is guarded." Suddenly, whispers and voices were heard from the darkness. They were probably spirits or ghosts of the past. "What are they saying?" Leah asked. "They are the guards," Mark answered. "They don't want us to touch this place. We must be careful." They approached the statue and began to examine the crystal. Mark touched it, and suddenly a strong current was felt. Shadows began to appear from here, manifestations of the past. "This is evil," said Leah. "We need to destroy it." They understood that this crystal was the cause of all the troubles of the civilization that once existed here. To stop evil, it must be destroyed. Mark took a hammer and began to break the crystal. From his blows, cracks and strange sounds began to appear, like the cry of a silent soul. "It works!" exclaimed Leah. The darkness dissipated. The shadows disappeared, and they felt that evil had left this underground world. But they knew this was not the end, but only the beginning. Chapter 3: Return to the Surface and New Discoveries. The next morning, when the first rays of sunlight began to penetrate through the cracks in the rock formations, Leah and Mark were already on their feet. They quickly gathered their things, trying not to lose any little thing that could be important. Their hearts were beating faster than usual. They felt they had accomplished something great, but they knew there was still a lot of work to do. Climbing out of the underground temple was not easy. The entrance was narrow, and they had to climb through several stone cracks that seemed to break at any moment. The entire journey back was filled with tension. The silence was broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the soft rustle of stones and leaves. When they came outside, they were greeted by the first rays of the sun, a bright and warm light that seemed to awaken this once-forgotten island from its slumber. Some strange harmony filled the air, and they felt victorious. However, their inner state was complex. Emotions were mixed with anxiety and anticipation of new discoveries. "That's strange," Mark said, glancing at the horizon. They disappeared. Those shadows, as if they had never been there. They descended a narrow stone staircase that seemed older than any of their experience. The air was filled with the smell of dampness and dust. The candles and lanterns they had brought with them reflected off the walls, creating a strange play of light and shadow. The corridor was winding and narrow. On the sides were strange symbols and runes, glowing blue and green. They were so ancient that it was difficult to understand their meaning, but their power was felt. "This place is older than anything I have seen," Mark whispered. "Something very important is kept here." "This is the heart of civilization," Leah answered. As they walked further, a strange silence began to appear. It seemed that with each step, time stopped, and the earth itself breathed. They walked over broken slabs, on which strange images and figures remained, gods, symbols, scenes from ancient times. Suddenly, a large hall opened before them, and Mark stopped. "Here it is. There must be something special here." In the center, a huge statue, holding a crystal in its hand, the light of which filled the room. It was an artifact that reminded of its power and danger. "This is the source of everything," said Leah, coming closer. "But it is guarded." From here, the manifestations of the past began. Shadows that moved in the darkness, as if they had come to life and whispered in strange voices. "These are spirits," said Mark. "They are the guardians of this secret." They understood that they needed to be very careful here. They began to examine the crystal and realized that it was the source of evil that was destroying civilization. Mark took a hammer and began to break the crystal. The blows began to make crackles and strange sounds, reminiscent of the cries of a silent soul. "It works!" Leah exclaimed. Shadows began to appear from the darkness, manifestations of the past. They began to retreat, disappearing into the darkness. Mark and Leah stood in the center of the ruin, breathing deeply. They felt that they had done something great, but inside there were still doubts. "Have we really stopped evil?" Leah asked. "Or has it simply temporarily left this world?" "We can't know for sure," Mark answered. "But I feel that this moment is important. We did what we could." They looked at each other and felt that their mission was not just about finding secrets. They had become carriers of an important responsibility. Leah nodded, looking at the surrounding forest and rocks. "They were part of this place, and now they are gone. We did what was necessary. But what does this mean for the future?" They walked towards a small settlement nearby. It was a small camp with a few huts, where the locals lived, people who had long known about these lands, or who had accidentally found themselves here. They were silent, but attentive to the unusual guests. After a short conversation with the locals, who listened to their stories with amazement, Leah and Mark felt that they needed to take a few more steps. They decided to explore the island further, explore new parts of it to make sure that evil had really been destroyed. Feeling somewhat tired, but filled with new strength, they moved deeper into the island. They walked through a dense forest, where fresh air filled their lungs, and the exquisite singing of birds accompanied their every step. Later, they came across ruins, the remains of ancient structures preserved in time. They were the remains of temples, steles, and columns that seemed to hold many more secrets. Their interest was captured in their looks and movements. "This is another part of civilization," Mark said, coming closer. "They left traces of their existence here." "And they are part of our history," Leah added, carefully examining the engravings on the stones. "But what happened to them? Why did they disappear?" They began exploring the ruins, and gradually their path led to discoveries, underground passages, and additional rooms that hid even greater secrets. As they passed the ruins, they felt a strange cold and a feeling that they were being followed. They went into the dungeons, where even more mysteries awaited them. Epilogue. After returning home, Leah and Mark began to tell their story. Their adventure became a legend, about the island of shadows that was destroyed by a dark force and how they were able to stop it. Their names entered the history of explorers and seekers of secrets.